Carolyn Dube here. What's the play for today? Well, today I'm going to be playing with a stencil and I'm going to share with you a little trick that I use to get that really loose look when you're creating. And it's also going to involve getting into a little bit of a pickle as well as river dance. Yep, that's all waiting for you here in this video. I'm going to start by stenciling some of these women here onto a piece of copy paper. Nothing fancy, just white paper that I'm using. And these women are from the Sketchy Women with Attitude stencil that I designed for over at StencilGirl Products. Now, as I'm doing this, I want to get a crisp, clean image. So there are 3 things that I'm doing to help make that easy to do. The first thing that I'm doing is I'm using a small amount of paint. That's why you'll see me dab that cosmetic sponge off on my palette to make sure I've just got a small amount of paint on there. The second thing that I do to get a crisp stenciled image is I pounce straight up and down. And this actually is pretty tough for me because I like to go side to side with it, but I will get a crisper image if I go straight up and down. And the third thing is to use thick paint. I'm using a heavy body paint here, and that really makes a difference when you want to get crisp images. Now for the paint palette I'm using there, that happens to be a 3x5 gel plate, and you can use that or anything else that you like to use for a palette. A scrap piece of plastic, the lid from the margarine container, whatever it is you've got, you can use for a palette. Because stencils can't be used up, you can do one of these or as many as you want. And I actually did a nice big stack of these so I can play around with adding some color to them. This technique uses a very small amount of paint. I've just got a little bit of each color I want to play with there on my palette. And I'm going to be applying the paint squeegee style. I'm going to be using this thing called a mini blade. I've put a small amount of paint right on the tip, and then I'm going to swipe it over the image. Now this tool is bigger and wider than some of the small areas I want to get into. So the trick to doing those is to put a small amount of paint on there. Notice I just put a little bit on the end. That way I've just got a little bit of paint and I can then put it in a smaller area. I'm also wiping the blade off after each color, just on a piece of scrap paper. That way it's clean for the next color. And on top of that, I'm gonna get some great scrap paper as all those little bits of color build up on that. If you're thinking to yourself, wow, this tool looks like it's a little big to get in and do some of that detail work. Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a little too big, but that's one of the great things about it. So as I go and get some blue paint here, get some teal on there to do her hair on the middle woman, what you're going to notice is I'm putting a small amount on that blade, and then I'm trying to color in where her hair is. And you might be thinking, why don't I grab something smaller? Well, I'll tell you why in just a minute. As I grab this wonderful, vibrant magenta purpley color here, I actually put color all along that mini blade. And the reason for that is I'm doing a larger area. So when I'm working in a larger space, I can put more color on there, and that way I can get the whole thing done a little faster. Now there's little slivers of white here and there where I don't quite go all the way to the edge. That's not this massive artistic vision. It's not this pre-planned kind of thing. It really comes as a function of using that mini blade here to apply the paint. So because I can't see where I'm working over my own hands sometimes, I stop a little bit early. And what I found is I really like that look with these. The other thing that I found by using a tool that's just a little bit bigger than ideal for what I'm doing is it allows me to loosen up. Well, I should say more, it forces me to loosen up, because when you're trying to move something bigger into smaller spaces, sometimes you're gonna go where you didn't mean to with the color. Notice the blue in that hair on the one I just did? It went a little on the outside. To me, that actually makes it more interesting if I've got this loose vibe to these women. Now these silicone mini blades, these are workhorses in my studio. And the reason for that is if I leave paint on them or I spread gel medium on with them, they're really easy to clean. You just have to wipe them off. And if you forget to clean them because they're made out of silicone, you can easily peel off anything that dries on it. So for me, that's a huge reason why I have these things around. But what do you do if you don't have one of these? Can you do this technique? Absolutely. If you've got something like an old hotel key card, a used up gift card, that kind of thing, just cut it in about half lengthwise, and that'll give you a tool that's about the same size as what I'm using here. And then you can simply scrape on or squeegee on the paint onto the stenciled images. With this technique, something that I've noticed every time that I do it is for the first set that I do, things feel a little stiffer. And it's almost like I have to warm up. I know, crazy idea, right? So that's why I like to have multiple sheets of these stenciled, because after doing one, I'm kind of warmed up and ready to do the next. Now, you've probably figured out by this point, I've sped up the camera here because you get the idea of how this works. And one of the cool things about swiping on the paint this way is little movements that are in there get captured in the paint and shows up. Like the blue shirt on that first one that I did. Notice how she's got just a little bit of a curve to it? That wasn't some big grand plan. That was me simply following the curve of the bottom of the shirt there. That's all I was doing. And that gave it just that nice little angle to it. Another way that you can vary the looks that you get with this is by changing up how much of the color you put on her. So on both the blue sweater and the orange dress there, I left a little more white on the right side of it. And that gives it a little different look than if I put that color all the way to the edge. And as I'm doing this, I'm completely flashing back to when I was a kid with those crayons and the Barbie fashion plates. Did you ever have those? I loved playing around with those things. Maybe that's why I had a hard time stopping after just one or two. Because yeah, I did these two, but then I did a bunch more of them. Just by staying in reds and greens, it had that Christmas vibe. Now, since this is just copy paper and paint, it was easy to let myself experiment around with different color combinations and see which ones I loved and which ones I'm like, I don't need to do those together again. Well, I'm in a pickle now. I've got this big stack of these colorful, sketchy women. What am I going to do with them? Well, that's not much of a pickle for me. It's actually the place I love to be in because I love to have a stack of something next to me ready to go because it opens up a lot of potential ideas that I might not have thought of. Plus two, anytime I'm creating an art journal page, a collage, whatever I'm doing, I've got them right there ready to go. But you might be wondering, well, how might I use those? So let me show you here in the next part of the video a couple of ways that I play with them. I'm going to build an art journal page here. I've taken a background. And by the way, you could use a gel print for this. You could use a piece of scrapbook paper. You could use a paper that you've made, anything that you've got. And then you simply stick it onto the art journal page and you've got a background done in a blink of an eye. Now, one of the things, if you are going to glue paper onto it, if you actually want all of the edges to stick and stay flat, you actually have to put some of the glue on the edges. You might be thinking, wow, that's pretty obvious, but apparently it's something that I struggle with quite a bit. So I frequently have to go back and add a little bit more glue to the edges. Now, when you've got a stack of sketchy women like this, you can pick the one that you like the most to go on there. The one that matches the most in the color or the look or the vibe that you want for it. So I'm going to glue her down on there, but there's a little bit of something underneath her feet. That's a little bit of over stenciling, just a little bit of the black paint there. And so what I'm going to do is take a word to cover that up. And I went through, scanned through all the words that are here on this reverse stenciling that I've got and picked the one that really stood out to me, that really matched the attitude that she had. Now, stencils are incredibly versatile, can give you lots of looks. And if you're wondering how to get the reverse stenciled look where you've got the black background and the words are white, I've made a video showing you how to do that step by step, and I'll have that link down below for you. And I still don't understand that if you want the whole thing to stick, you got to put glue everywhere. So a little bit more added there to the corner. And now this art journal page is finished. When I designed this stencil, this pose was her either standing up against a wall or her with her hand up going talk to the hand kind of thing. But once I laid these 5 out in a row, I saw something on there I had never seen before. Because there was a little bit of over stenciling on the bottom there, it created almost a shadow underneath them, made them look like they were jumping up in the air. And having a line of them like this, all I could think about was river dance. Now, this page isn't finished yet. I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I just had to share the whole river dance experience with you. This next idea that I'm going to share with you, this is using them to make a collage. And what I've done is just grabbed a bunch of scraps in the colors that I have on her, and I'm going to use those to build up the collage. Now, I'm actually building this on a card so that I could mail it to a friend, but it would also work if you wanted to create a collage like this to then add onto an art journal page or into something else that you're creating. Earlier in the video, I mentioned how I seem to forget about doing the edges and corners when I'm applying glue sometimes, but not here. I purposely did not go to those corners because what I'm going to do is stick it on here in the middle, get her to stay where I want her to go, but all of those other little scraps, they're going to get tucked underneath her, and that's why I didn't want to put a bunch of glue around the edges because, again, I know I'm going to be tucking some stuff under there. What I've shared with you here in this video, is this the only way that you can use a stencil, the only way that you can add paint to it, the only way that you can create elements using it? Nope, not at all. This is simply the tip of the iceberg. There are so many ways to use stencils. For all practical purposes, it's unlimited. And if you're curious about different ways to use stencils, if you want to get more out of the stencils that you have, create more looks with what you've got, then I encourage you to check out my online workshop, The Joy of Stenciling. I'll have a link down below for you, and you can find all the details over on my website at acolorfuljourney.com. Now that I've got all the elements on the collage that I want, now I'm going to go back and add a little bit of glue to those corners to hold down any parts that are sticking up. Well, thanks so much for joining me for today's play. If you've been enjoying this video, if you've had fun, if you found it helpful, I'd so appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. And of course, if you enjoyed it and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. That way you'll know as soon as I've got a new video out. Know a friend that you think would enjoy this? Absolutely send this along to them so they can join in the fun too. Well, thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.